Hey guys, welcome back to The Readers. I hope you are having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first one is pro-revenge story. Just scrolling through social media and reading about entitled drivers getting what they deserve made me think back to my days as a paramedic in 2023. We got a call to a house where there was a bariatric patient who had fallen. The patient was morbidly obese and weighed around 30 stone, 420 pounds. This story isn't really about them though. There are many reasons people get to this size, and I've never judged, only helped. No, the problem here was this incredibly arrogant neighbor we had encountered before, and believe me, this person was the definition of a judgmental moron. Our patient had a car and a legitimate disabled parking permit. They also had a council-designated disabled parking spot outside their home, which the neighbor kept parking in, despite numerous warnings. "We've sent this guy at least 5 notices," my colleague told me one day. "He just tears them up and throws them in the bin." The parking fines just seemed to make him more defiant. He'd stand in his front garden, arms crossed, watching as the parking enforcement officers wrote tickets. "Go ahead," he'd shout. "Write another one. I'll appeal it like all the others." On this particular winter morning, I took the call that the patient had fallen. When we arrived at the scene, the situation was even worse than usual. Not only was the neighbor parked in the disabled spot, but he had also positioned a second car blocking access to the patient's driveway. After my initial assessment, I suspected a broken hip, definitely a hospital case. I sent my partner to speak with the neighbor. Through the window, I could see the conversation wasn't going well. "Sorry, mate," my colleague reported back, shaking his head. His exact words were, "Do one. I'm not moving either car. Not my problem." "Right then," I said, reaching for my radio. "Time to escalate this." I contacted our control center. "Dispatch, we're going to need fire service and police assistance at this location. We have a bariatric patient with suspected hip fracture and blocked access." The fire service arrived first, their red engine gleaming in the morning sun. I briefed the crew commander about the situation. "Let me try talking to him first," the commander said. One of his crew members went to knock on the neighbor's door. The neighbor's response was immediate and hostile. "I don't care who you are. Those cars aren't moving." The crew member returned, and the commander turned to me with a knowing look. "Simple question. Is the patient's life at risk?" I knew exactly where this was heading. "Yes," I replied firmly. "I have essential equipment I need to get into the house, and that blocked driveway is preventing me from doing my job." The commander nodded and keyed his radio. "Driver, clear those vehicles." What happened next was absolutely beautiful to watch. The massive fire engine slowly moved forward, its front bumper connecting with the first car. With practiced precision, they pushed both vehicles down the road, clearing the way. The neighbor came bursting out of his house, face red with rage. "What the hell do you think you're doing? That's criminal damage! I'm calling the police!" "We're already here," came a voice from behind him. 2 police officers had arrived during the commotion, and were well aware of your history with this parking spot. "But they just pushed my cars," he spluttered. The senior officer was unmoved. "The paramedic has declared this a life-threatening situation. We have the authority to remove any obstruction to emergency services. You're lucky we're not arresting you for willfully obstructing emergency workers. With the way clear, we were able to get our equipment in and properly treat our patient. Though they sadly passed away a few months later in the hospital, I'll never forget the smile that crossed their face as we wheeled them past their neighbor's pushed cars. First time I've seen him speechless in years," they whispered to me. The neighbor moved away shortly after that incident. I heard he tried to sue the fire department, but it went nowhere. Sometimes it takes a dramatic lesson for entitled people to understand that their actions have consequences. The next one is an entitled people story. 5 years ago, my life changed forever when my son was nearly killed at our neighborhood playground. What followed was a nightmare of denials, threats, and eventually a legal battle that brought an entire HOA to its knees. We moved into the Oak Ridge Heights neighborhood about 7 years ago. It seemed perfect. Good schools nearby, well-maintained streets, and a big playground for my son Alex, who was 4 at the time. The HOA fees were steep at $350 a month, but they promised top-notch maintenance of all common areas, especially the playground. For the first 2 years, everything was fine. The playground was decent, not amazing, but it had slides, swings, and a climbing structure that Alex loved. Then our HOA president, a woman I'll just call Mrs. Powertrip, decided to retire and was replaced by a guy I'll call Mr. Cheapskate. Almost immediately, things started going downhill. The landscaping became spotty, the community pool was closed more often than open due to maintenance issues, and the playground started looking rough. The wooden climbing structure developed splinters, the slide cracked, and one of the swings broke completely. I wasn't the only one who noticed. Several parents brought it up at the monthly HOA meeting. "The playground equipment is becoming dangerous," I said when it was my turn to speak. "The climbing structure is wobbling and there are exposed screws on the slide." Mr. Cheapskate barely looked up from his phone. "We've had our maintenance team look at it. Everything is within safety parameters." "What maintenance team?" another parent asked. "I haven't seen anyone work on that playground in months." "We've outsourced to a new company," Mr. Cheapskate replied. "They've assured us everything is fine. Next issue?" I wasn't satisfied with that answer, so I sent emails. Lots of emails. I documented every safety issue I saw and attached photos. The responses were always the same. "We'll look into it," or "It's been addressed," or my personal favorite, "The equipment meets minimum safety standards." Then came the day that still gives me nightmares. It was a Saturday afternoon in May. I was sitting on a bench watching Alex, now 6, play on the climbing structure with 2 other kids from the neighborhood. He was at the top, about 8 feet off the ground, when I heard a crack. Everything seemed to move in slow motion. The entire structure tilted to one side, and then the support beam snapped completely. I was already running before the first piece hit the ground. Kids were screaming, parents were shouting, and Alex was falling. He landed hard on his side with part of the wooden structure falling across his legs. I reached him as he was trying to push the beam off himself, his face white with shock and pain. I remember lifting that beam like it weighed nothing, pure adrenaline, and pulling him away from the wreckage. By some miracle, Alex wasn't killed. But his right leg was broken in 2 places. His arm was fractured, and he had a concussion from hitting his head on the way down. The other 2 kids had minor injuries, scrapes and bruises mostly. We were the unlucky ones. I rode with Alex in the ambulance, trying to keep it together while he cried in pain. My husband met us at the hospital. The next few days were a blur of doctors, x-rays, casts, and medication. Alex needed surgery to set his leg properly, and the doctors warned us that he might have long-term issues with that knee. When I finally had a moment to breathe, I was filled with rage. This accident was completely preventable. The HOA had been warned repeatedly about the playground's condition and had done nothing. I called Mr. Cheapskate the day after the accident. "I'm sorry to hear about your son," he said, sounding anything but sorry. "But the HOA can't be held responsible for playground accidents. There are signs posted about playing at your own risk." "This wasn't a normal accident," I said, my voice shaking. "The entire structure collapsed because it wasn't maintained. We warned you this would happen." "Those warnings were addressed," he said firmly. "Our inspection showed everything was fine. This was just an unfortunate incident, and I suggest you don't try to make it something it's not." "What does that mean?" I asked. "It means that pursuing any kind of action against the HOA would be inadvisable and ultimately fruitless." That's when I decided to get a lawyer. Finding an attorney wasn't hard. One of my colleagues had a brother who specialized in personal injury cases. After reviewing my documentation of the safety concerns and the accident, he agreed to take the case on contingency. "This is egregious negligence," he told me. "They had a duty of care. They were warned repeatedly about the danger and they did nothing. We have a very strong case." What I didn't expect was how dirty the HOA would play. Within days of receiving our intent to sue, they sent a letter to every homeowner in the neighborhood stating that dues would likely increase by 40% due to frivolous legal action by a resident. They didn't name me directly, but in a neighborhood of 120 homes, word spread quickly. The dirty tactics continued. Someone anonymously posted flyers with our address and a message claiming we were trying to bankrupt the HOA for a minor playground incident. I started getting nasty looks at the mailbox. One neighbor even approached me in the grocery store and said, "You know, kids get hurt all the time. It's part of growing up." It was infuriating, but I wasn't backing down. My son had spent a week in the hospital, faced months of physical therapy, and still woke up crying from nightmares about falling. This wasn't just about the money, though the medical bills were enormous, even with insurance. It was about holding them accountable. During discovery, we found out something that made my blood boil. The HOA had actually hired an inspector to look at the playground. Once, 3 years earlier, when the equipment was first showing signs of wear, that inspector had recommended immediate repairs or replacement of several components, including the support beams that eventually failed. The report had estimated repairs would cost around $15,000. The board, led by Mr. Cheapskate, had decided that was too expensive. Instead, they hired a handyman to do cosmetic fixes for $1,200 and called it a day. The meeting minutes showed they had explicitly discussed the safety concerns and decided to postpone major renovations to save money. My lawyer was practically rubbing his hands together when he showed me these documents. "This is beyond negligence," he said. "This is willful disregard for safety. They knew the playground was dangerous and chose to do nothing." The case never made it to trial. Once our lawyer presented the evidence during mediation, the HOA insurance company realized they were looking at a potential jury verdict that could be astronomical. They offered to settle. The final settlement was $2.4 million to $1.8 million for Alex's injuries, pain, and suffering, and future medical needs, and $600,000 in punitive damages. The insurance company also demanded that the entire HOA board resign as a condition of the settlement, as their negligence had created massive liability. When the settlement was finalized, Mr. Cheapskate had the nerve to email me personally. "I hope you're happy," he wrote. "Your greed has destroyed this community. HOA fees will triple to cover this, and the playground will have to be removed entirely." I forwarded the email to my lawyer, who contacted their attorney. Within 24 hours, Mr. Cheapskate was forced to send a retraction and apology to the entire neighborhood, acknowledging the board's negligence and clarifying that the settlement would be paid by insurance, not by increasing HOA fees. The aftermath was complicated. Some neighbors still blamed us, but most were supportive once the full story came out. The entire HOA board was replaced, and the new president's first action was to hire a reputable company to install a new, properly maintained playground. As for Alex, he's 11 now. He still has a slight limp when he's tired, and he needed a second surgery last year to address some lingering issues with his leg. The settlement money is in a trust for his education and future medical needs, with a portion set aside that he can access when he turns 25. I don't regret pursuing the lawsuit for a second. The HOA had one job, to maintain common areas safely, and they failed spectacularly. They gambled with children's safety to save a few dollars, and my son paid the price. Making them pay financially was the least I could do to ensure it never happened to another child. The most satisfying part? At the grand opening of the new playground, there's a small plaque listing safety guidelines. At the bottom, in small but readable text, it says, "This playground was rebuilt in 2019 following a safety incident. Oak Ridge Heights HOA is committed to maintaining all equipment to the highest safety standards." It's the closest thing to an admission of guilt I'll ever get, and I'll take it. The next one is a malicious compliance story. So my relatives and parents are very firmly a part of this cult. It's mostly in the States, but it does have some worldly presence. Not going to say which one it is because I don't want my parents to find this post. I left the cult about 2 years ago now, after they refused to acknowledge that I had several medical problems, and the religion believes that people can become like Jesus and heal their own bodies. Whack, right? And I'm not talking about a little scratch or a cold. I'm talking about cancers, contagious diseases like measles, polio, whooping cough, broken bones, psychological disorders. It's really crazy. But whenever I come back, they always make me go to Sunday school to show respect for the family. Bullcrap. It's because they want to convert me back, and whenever someone from the cult finds out someone has left, they make it their personal mission to bring them back. So this past Sunday, I didn't have work, and my dad told me I had to go to church with the family. He said I'm still able to go to Sunday school since I'm just in university. We arrived to the church. I'm super dressed up, like very fancy looking. The women, when I come in, are very pleased. They know I've left and are like, "Wow, it's so nice to see you back. Hope you come more often now we've missed you." I go down to my Sunday school class, and it's a bunch of uni kids and an older woman, strict-looking teacher. Perfect. She sits me down and starts talking about the Bible and what's wrong and right. Cue malicious compliance. I took 2 years of intensive Bible classes. I've translated from Hebrew and Greek. I've actually read the whole Bible cover to cover. Some points were made. Teacher. And so God said that we most never lie in bed with another of the same sex. Me. And where does it say that, ma'am? Teacher. Well, in this verse here shows me that was actually mistranslated from Hebrew. It actually says man shall not lie with boy. Teacher. Frustrated. No, that's not true, and besides, there's this verse here which says homosexual sex is wrong. Shows other verse me. So, by that logic, wouldn't that mean that anyone, male on male, female on male, or female on female who was having oral or anal sex would be gay? Teacher, horrified. The whole class went on like this. I refuted claims about the killing of children, the uselessness of prostitutes, about immigration, and so on. After church, my dad was pulled aside by the teacher, and when he came back, he sighed and shook his head and said, "Fine, you don't have to come anymore." I replied with, "Is she not impressed with my thorough knowledge of the Bible?" The next one is an entitled People Story, so it is once again time for one of my stories. And this is going to be a long one, because this is a story that took place over the course of several days and involved no less than 4 Karens, 2 guides, a receptionist, and the owner of the hotel. This story takes place in northern Sweden at a hotel and tour company I worked as a guide for. The events took place back in January of 2017. There were these 4 Filipinos, 2 couples staying at our hotel for a couple of days. My first interaction with them was on a daytime sightseeing trip down to the Norwegian coast. The tour is pretty simple. We drive along and stop at beautiful places and some historically interesting sites, and finally we end up in the city of Narvik. The tour is marketed as a sightseeing tour focused on nature, local culture, and local history. These 4 people, as well as a couple of other guests, were with me on this tour. About halfway through the tour, one of the men in the group who is sitting behind me leans forward and asks, "When will we see the helicopters?" This, of course, confused me quite a bit since nothing in the marketing or tour description says anything about helicopters. And their English was pretty good, so I can't see that it would be a language thing. I tell them that we sometimes see some helicopters flying around, but it's not that often, and it's not anything we actually look for or market. Cue a 15-minute discussion with these 4 people about helicopters, and why there wasn't any helicopters, and why I couldn't show them the helicopters. They just would not stop focusing on these helicopters because they thought there would be helicopters, and by the end of it, they say they are very disappointed, and they want to go back. And I could not get them to tell them where they got the helicopter idea from. Well, since I have a couple more guests, we are not just going to go back before the tour is finished because they can't see the helicopters. Well, at the next stop, they move to the back of the car and refuse to talk to me or get out of the car for the rest of the tour until we are back in Abisko. The other guests were super confused about it all and enjoyed the tour. That was day 1. I don't know if they had anything booked for that night. If they did, it was probably with another company since I didn't hear anything about it. Then comes day 2. I didn't do a tour in the morning, so I was just taking the morning slow when the receptionist calls me and asks if I could come to the reception because he was very confused about an email they just got. I was around the hotel to prepare for the evening's tour, so I go to the reception to have a look. It's from the 4 Filipinos I had yesterday. Today they are on a moose spotting trip with another guide, and they are quite upset. The email was very long and rambly, but it was something along the lines of, "We are very disappointed in this goose spotting trip. We have not seen a single goose yet. We were told there are a lot of geese. The guide saw an animal and said if was a moose, but it was a horse. Note that they were still on the tour, and at this point in time, they were not even halfway through the tour. I am the senior guide at this place, and I am responsible for training the other guides and for dealing with situations that may arise, so I call the guide just to see what is going on. The guide says those 4 people are quite upset, and they keep talking about geese. He has told them several times it's a moose spotting trip and there won't be any geese, but they are not having it. He has also found 4 moose, but those same guests keep insisting they are horses, and they were using goose and geese correctly, so it did appear they know the animal they were talking about. The reception soon gets another email complaining about false marketing and that we should not sell goose spotting tripe if they are only going to see horses. I don't know exactly when transpired during the rest of the tour, but they did eventually come back and disappeared to their rooms without any fuss. The guide said they were the strangest people he'd ever had on a tour. You'd think this was it, but no, it keeps going. That night I have them on the Aurora BBQ tour. This is a tour specifically marketed as a traditional style from the Sami people made with local reindeer meat. Then after that we go chasing for the Aurora. The picture for the tour shows the giant pan we cook the food in over the fire. It's quite obvious what the tour is about. So the tour starts. I have these people as well as 8 others for a total of 12 Everyone shows up for the tour, and these 4 people show up with a large bowl of cooked rice each. I tell them that we have enough food, they don't have to bring rice. And in response to that they say, "We are Filipino, we need rice." Okay, whatever, let them have rice. During the tour, they plainly refuse to even try the reindeer meat, and they just sit in the corner eating rice from their big bowls of rice, claiming they are all on a diet and they can't eat the food offered. When the cooking is done and we are going to get ready for the Aurora chasing part, they say they don't want to join for Aurora chasing and head with their half-eaten bowls of rice. The receptionists lives in a small cabin next to the hotel so that they can be nearby in case of emergencies. You know, like people locking themselves out from the hotel in the middle of the night. We don't usually tell guests where the receptionists live so they won't go there and bother them for no reason, but somehow these people have found out where they live and have now gone there and banged on the door until one receptionist opens the door and talks to them. I didn't catch the start of the discussion, but as I walked around the corner, this is what I caught. They are shouting at this point about how horrible the BBQ was. There was no pork, no chicken, and no beef. How can we even call that a BBQ? And the guide was incredibly rude and so on. They loudly proclaim that we are all terrible and our service is terrible. And one guy who seemed to be the leader of the group proclaims, "We are the guests here. We should be the kings. You should give us what we want because you are below us." The receptionist, who clearly has had it with these people, tells them, "We are in Sweden now. Here everyone is equal." At this, the whole group goes quiet. This was apparently an idea that took them several seconds to process. After a few seconds of silence, the guy says, "I don't like Sweden anymore." And the whole group turns around, sees me and stop to stare a few seconds before they huff and puff and walk off. The next day, they check out. This morning, the owner of the hotel was in the reception, and they did try to complain to him too, but I had told him everything that had happened, so he was prepared and he was not having any of it. He basically tells them to send a compliant to whatever is their favorite deity and see what happens. They eventually leave by taxi. We did get a couple of angry emails sent to every email address the hotel used. They were all ignored. After this whole thing, we decide to look up these people. And as it turns out, they are some sort of discount nobles. They wear the heads of a wealthy and very politically influential family in the Philippines. And as another Filipino I talked to later said, they are used to everyone obeying them and them getting whatever they want whenever they wanted it, so getting talked back to by what they viewed as lowly servants must have been quite the culture shock. I'll be back with more stories in the future. I'll tell a couple of shorter ones next after this long haul of a story. Anyway, thank you for watching.